This is The Cross Section with Nate Lull and David Edelstein.
So Nate, I feel like watching what's been going on across the state recently, it's actually been very surreal for me to be back at practices covering them. It just feels, after so long away from high school sports, and I'm sure it feels even more surreal for the student athletes themselves, but just to be back, it almost feels like, am I really here? But I know at the same time that for you, you're in Section 4 area where they have decided to suspend all sports across the section. Whereas for Section 3, the section's going ahead, but some individual leagues and school districts are on their own still postponing for the time being. But to be back has been definitely interesting. But I wanted to hear just what some of the updates were from you. Do you feel like you're still almost like in a void now where you're just looking ahead to November 30th for winter at this point, and what is going on in the meantime?
Yeah, I think people are frustrated down here, especially when they can look up at our neighbors in Section 3, which I feel like that's who we look to the most for a lot of things, because it's normally a team that we would play in regionals in a variety of sports. So I feel like there's that relationship between 3 and 4, and to see practices going on and to see players out on the field, I think it has some Section 4 athletes in a weird place, and I think it's been hard for the athletes, the coaches, and everybody to see that other parts of the state are playing, and we're continuing to kind of be in this weird space. But everybody I talk to seems to have a different opinion. Some people are very happy with the decision that the section made and the leagues made down here. They feel like it was the right thing. Like, we got to focus on school first and getting all those things, get our ducks in a row before we get back to sports. I heard a lot of chatter about just how confusing things were with the guidelines, that schools didn't think they'd be able to pull it off. And then I hear a lot of people saying, look, Section 3 is doing it, other sections are doing it. We're playing Pony League every weekend. There's all these travel sports. Why couldn't we have given it a try? So the jury is out. Everybody is still kind of all over the place with how they feel about this. For me, I do have Pony League baseball that I can continue to cover every Saturday and Sunday. But during the week, it has been very strange to go home at 5 o'clock, almost like I have a regular 9 to 5 instead of being at a game of some kind. So it's been bizarre, to say the least.
Yeah, and remind me if I forget in a moment, I do want to mention the schedules that have been coming out for Section 3, because that's different also compared to what we're used to, just the breakdown of how this is all set up. But what you just said reminds me of is just last night, even some school districts in Section 3 have been deciding on their own to postpone. And we also had the Central Counties League as a full league postpone that's out, obviously in Central Oneida County. But last night I was paying attention to the Old Forge Board of Education meeting down up in the town of Webb in northern Herkimer County, and they were trying to figure out whether they wanted to proceed with high school fall sports or not. And we have to remember that when Section 3 did their balloting about 2 weeks ago, the poll came back that 58% of schools voted that they wanted to proceed with fall sports in this fall, the low and moderate risk sports, and 42% of schools said they wanted to postpone to fall too. And that was out of 97 schools that responded. So let's say round that to 100, that's about 58 schools said, let's play, 42 said, we want to suspend. And the first thought I had was, since they are going ahead, will those 42% bear it out and try and figure it out? Or if they really feel like they're not in a position to have fall sports right now, interscholastic athletics, will they drop out? And we've seen Remsen, Waterville, Cooperstown, Indian River, Sherburne, Earlville, Morrisville, Eaton, Hamilton, all suspend. Oneida, and again, the entire Central Counties League. Last night, Old Forge met, which Thursday night, and they had this interesting back and forth during their public forum of different surveys they had sent out. So they surveyed their faculty and staff, and apparently the staff had commented, we need more time. We want to be focusing on getting back in school. There was a survey of student athletes, apparently, the varsity student athletes, where 60% said, let's postpone, 40% said, let's play. And there was also these dynamics they mentioned between the teams of, even on a specific team, the girls varsity soccer team for Old Forge, it was mentioned that there were about 24 of them, where 14 of them said they were willing to play and just go, play. 10 of them didn't want to play, so down to 14. And then of those 14, they said 4 of them didn't want to play interscholastically, but they just wanted to play with their teammates. And so this whole discussion was going back and forth for a while of the Board of Education and others bringing up there was a lot of concern with the main point of we want to keep school open. And they were also discussing if they wanted to postpone to fall 2 in town of Webb in Old Forge, would the weather even accommodate that? What's going to happen? I know coaches who are playing this fall 1 are concerned of the central New York weather come November when they'll be playing. Right now, the latest date that's scheduled is November 10th. The season for Section 3 ends November 14th. So there is a lot of these individual schools who have decided to postpone. Last night, Old Forge did decide that they were going to suspend sports. It was voted and announced at the end of their Board of Education meeting, which I was following through live stream online. And it's just interesting to see, once these schedules have been coming out, now they're going to have to redo them already. But individual schools here are not playing. So it's not like the full thing that we're used to either in Section 3.
Yeah, that's I think that throws a whole other wrinkle into it. And I've heard the same thing down here is, how are they going to pull off this fall 2 season when most of the schools that you cover and I cover are probably playing a lot of games on grass? How are they going to do that in March and April, et cetera? So there are a lot of those concerns. What is the vibe up there with, again, all those schools? I mean, you just mentioned 7, 8, 9 schools. You're having to redo the schedule. I mean, are they just kind of saying, hey, we'll play whoever? It doesn't really matter about leagues. It doesn't really matter about anything. Like, if we have 2 schools that can get together and play, that's what we want to do. Is that kind of the approach they're taking?
Yeah, well, first of all, on the weather point, it is serious because, I asked our meteorologist at the television station when we should really expect snow. And I was asking more because I want to know when I should actually put snow tires on so I could get up the hill to work every day, which has been an issue. But seriously, he said, mid-October is when we'll see flurries and accumulation. And the season was extended. So I was telling the coaches, we're going to take a shovel just like they do in the NFL with the lines. What are we going to do? Shovel off the outside? But I guess we'll see. Like Rob Zayas said, the executive director of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, we're all praying for the warmest winter in central New York ever, or the driest, at least, we should say. Cold is less of the issue. But the vibe is that they just want to play. When I'm speaking with the coaches, but also it's been really refreshing to speak with the student athletes again, because it's really about them and their experience, and everyone's trying to work on behalf of them. After all these logistical conversations and planning and New York State Department of Health and everything, it's good to hear from the student athletes again and see them. The vibe from what they're saying is they're just happy to be playing. Literally from when we're talking right now on Friday, September 25th, just 5 days ago, most of them thought the season wasn't going to happen, and they just had no idea whether anything would be figured out. And then it was just decided, okay, we're going forward. And they see some of these students, I've only gone to practices where they're happening so far. So I'm going to still get in touch with schools like Remsen and see whether I could talk to some of their student athletes in Old Forge now and see what are those student athletes thinking, because there's these students who are practicing are seeing their rival schools, their right next door neighbors, deciding that they can't make it happen, or they don't feel that this is the time to make it happen. So the vibe really is, from what I'm getting, is that they want to play. They're happy to be back with their teams. They're happy to be back with their teammates. One of the things that was mentioned at the Old Forge board meeting was that if they don't do interscholastic athletics, which they voted not to do, maybe they're still going to do practices, or I have to check in with athletic director Tanner Russell. He told me he couldn't speak with me yet, but they're devising a plan of intramural competitions of some kind, even if it's not the traditional sports. One of the public forum students who spoke, a community member who spoke at that Board of Ed meeting, said that she wanted, maybe it was more about just being with your teammates and doing something. So the vibe really is just playing. They have changed up the leagues because of all these postponed schools. So the Central State Conference, instead of their typical 4 divisions, is now in 2 divisions, an East and a West. And while Herkimer, Dolgeville, Little Falls, West Canada are all in the East, and they're against their typical rivals from their Division 2, Holland Patton and Clinton are 2 other schools in the area who are usually in division together in the Central State Conference. And they are now split into the East and the West. And so they're currently not scheduled to play each other at the moment. Things could change still imminently. Old Forge is pulled out. Maybe they take Clinton and say, okay, Clinton, you're going to play Holland Patton because we have this Old Forge slot that needs to be filled against Holland Patton now at some point. So who knows? But I know that there's the vibe of that you're just happy to play whoever it is. They'd love to play the teams that they know, but really it's just amazing to get back on the field, even though it's different.
How has the MAC situation been? What's the how's that going at practice? What's the feedback you're getting from especially the athletes that have to wear them and try to play and exercise with them on?
Yeah, I was literally just thinking that in my head, but I didn't want my answer to go excuse me, I didn't want my answer to go too long for that question I just asked you, that you just asked me rather, that I was just answering. But masks is the biggest thing that everyone brings up. Not even when I ask the question of what's your biggest concern for this season. It's just in general, I'm like, how's it been? And the first thing is, we're glad to be back. And the second thing is the masks are a little annoying. But Kate Ozog from Poland, boys varsity soccer, he's a senior this year, already a 2-time sectional champion. He scored both goals in the sectional finals for Class D, Section 3 last year. Definitely been a standout athlete since he's been in Poland on the team. And I spoke with him and I said, what has the message been about wearing these masks? Even though he and others have said, it's different to wear them. It falls down. It's hard to, both girls and boys varsity teams have all said to me so far, it's hard to breathe a little bit. They were recommending they said, some of them said the coaches recommended not wearing the cloth masks, which I was wearing when I was at the practices. And yesterday it was 72 degrees and I felt the cloth was thick. So they're wearing more of the temporary, the disposable ones, I guess. Apparently those are being recommended for them to be the ones that they wear. I guess they say it's a little easier to breathe. They say their biggest concern, and Kate Ozog had said their biggest concern is, hyperventilating while running around, breathing in, not being able to get enough oxygen. There is a difference. I mean, when you take it off, you can just more airflow. That's the point. But they're saying that they're just worried about running around at full speed, what that will be like. But at the end of the day, what Kate Ozog best described to me so far was when I asked, what's the message of wearing the masks, though? He's like, the coach says, if you want to play, you're wearing the mask. So
yeah, I mean,
it's kind of been,
yeah, like that there are no other ways around it. Like if you want to play, you have to wear it. I know I've been reading a lot of newspaper articles from a lot of soccer teams. Mostly I like to follow the Class D soccer teams that normally I would see at states, and I've kind of made relationships with those reporters in other areas of New York State. I think Class D is kind of like a family because when you go to states, like you see a lot of the same teams all the time, but a lot of them have put out those same words, like, these teams are back. They want to practice. This is their senior year. They're happy to get a chance and put it out there. So they're like, hey, whatever we have to do, if coach says wear masks, that's the only way we're going to get to practice and play games, then that's what we have to do. So that's exciting to see your coverage and see you back at practices and games. And it seems like some schools have been pretty willing to like let you come and cover things from a distance off. Have other schools said, hey, we still want to take some time and get things kind of squared away before we come out?
Yeah, that's definitely been interesting for me too, because I had originally planned to go to Whitesboro, New Hartford on Monday, September 21st. The first day practices had happened, two of our biggest schools in the area. And then I got word that the Tri-Valley League in Section 3 had decided that there can be no media yet. And league president and New Hartford athletic director John Bannock said to me that, I was like, let me know when we can come. And he was like, yeah, we definitely want you there at some point. But they wanted to focus on just getting practices underway. But most schools, it's a different world. Everyone's wearing their mask. And of course I am wearing my mask when I go. I have my wireless microphone, so we're more than 6 feet apart. And the closest I get to anyone is when I hand them the microphone so that they can put it on, clip it onto them. And then I'm back at the camera, and before and after every use of that microphone and any other equipment, I have sanitizing wipes with me, so I keep remembering to grab that from the bag, sanitize it, so, and I'm thinking maybe those practices of sanitizing equipment might be brought into the future, because it might be useful to just continue. But for now, it is definitely different. And so the leagues, different schools have had their different things. So I'm definitely checking in with all the athletic directors and the coaches. So it's a different world. But so far, I've been to Poland, I've been to Herkimer, I've been to Clinton, and Notre Dame. And so far, all of the practices seem to be going well. I do notice something new, by the way, aside just whether I'm showing up or not to the practices. But when I am there, being there allows me to see what's actually happening. We call this Eyewitness News, Eyewitness Sports, very well. It's hard to call play-by-play if you can't see the game at all. So by being at the practice, I'm able to really get a sense of what this is like. I'm supposed, because in this moment, no visitors are allowed except for me, and limited spectators will be allowed at games, if any. I feel like it's more important than ever. I need to make sure that I'm seeing and hearing and feeling what's going on in the atmosphere at these practices, so I can accurately describe it and show it and to the community. And one of the new things that I think is funny that I have not gotten from other schools, when I'm not able to go to school, I can't see this happening. Being at the school, it's funny to see. It's not really funny, but it's interesting. Never would expect. One of the new things that's happened is very frequently, instead of just water breaks, different pods of students, the coaches are giving them mask breaks. So you asked me about the masks. So by being there, I've been able to hear like no one would tell me it's a mask break. It's not like something someone just tells me, but they're like, I'm like, mask break. And I see them, they sit on the sidelines apart from each other and they take their mask off and they just breathe. They are breathing heavily coming off the field. So this is new, a mask break, along with a typical water break. And of course, with wearing the masks while they're running around, sometimes it does fall below their nose and they're running and they try and fix it. And the coaches have been pointing out, very audibly, mask up above your nose, like once they stop, to make sure they immediately put it back up if they're playing, because they have to wear it. But those little nuances of the game, by being there, and hopefully I'll be back at the Tri-Valley League soon, I'm sure, we get to see these things and how they're actually playing out. And that's just been interesting to me. I don't know if you've seen that with the Pony League or other sports that you are covering. How is when it's not interscholastic sports, what has the pressure been on following these protocol? What are the protocol? Because as we know, it is different between interscholastic athletics and not in interscholastic athletics, which is why it took so long for the high school sports to resume, because it was tied to education in so many different ways.
Yeah, I've really tried to this summer go to any event that I can, for many of the same reasons that you said, that people weren't going. So they were hungry for the information and to know what was going on. So all summer I was able to go to a softball league that involved several of our local teams, travel baseball games, this pony league that's going to be going until the end of October. And I even got to go to some AAU scrimmages and practices. So I was kind of looking at that two ways. One is supporting our local athletes who are in this kind of tough spot where they're just trying to find any opportunity they can to safely play. And then B, just I found that people were really interested in, hey, I can't go to that. Maybe normally I would go down to the park and watch this summer softball game or this travel league game, but I don't feel safe, but I can stay home and follow your Twitter updates. So we did get a lot of good feedback on that. I will say for the Pony League, it depends because, again, it's not governed by New York State Public High School Athletic Association. So I would say that I'm seeing a lot of good precautions, but it can be different at every park and every game I go to. So that is interesting to me. I've kind of described it publicly as the Wild West because you just don't know what you're going to get when you go to some of these games. And 95% of the time, everybody has been really good. I do see a lot of the protocols being followed, but you just never know at these things because they're not being as strict. Are they following the rules? Yes, I would say they are. But I'm not seeing mask breaks, and if one kind of fall down below the nose, coach might kind of go over and say, hey, could you pull that back up? But I don't think it's as strict as probably what you're seeing. That's the vibe that I get, but I appreciate that a lot of these individuals who are involved with the Pony League are just volunteers. They're not there to get paid. They're just trying to do anything they can. And so I think it's tough to put that on any community member individual to try to police everybody that's there. They're doing the best they can. And I've had absolutely no problems. I've been at dozens of games this summer. And for me, like you, I'm able to stand far away, keep my mask on, bring my lawn chair, sit in left field, out by the fence, whatever I need to do. I have not had any problems, and I haven't heard of anything in all the games that I've gone to this summer. I haven't heard of any problems from these games. So I think it's good that the kids can get out there and play. The Pony League I'm covering has a 16 and under division and a 19 and under division. So they created an older division just to allow those high school kids to have an opportunity to play. So that's been a lot of fun.
Let me ask you this. I feel like, in a way, you being immersed in Section 4 completely, even with no Fall 1 sports going on right now, you might be able to be the crystal ball for what's coming up. And I mean that, not that you're the only one in the state who doesn't have sports going on at the moment. Again, I think Section 3 and me being able to cover these sports until November 14th, when there's a break between November 14th and the potential November 30th start of winter sports, I feel like that's the oddball out at the moment. But I feel like you could be the crystal ball here, really being immersed in Section 4. What is happening right now as far as turning the focus toward winter sports? What are the conversations? Has anything started? Are people just taking a breather at the moment? What is happening in regard to what comes next for Section 4? Because while Section 3 is rightly focusing on scheduling and getting the games and what's going to start, when did they happen, whether schools are going to play or not, we're still very much in this ball sport mode for right now, figuring out immediately. And I'm sure John Rathbun, Executive Director of Section 3, is focusing already on the winter sports. Don't get me wrong. But while there's such a huge focus on fall sports right now, because we're in the middle of starting that season, for Section 4, you as a reporter and the executive leaders who are leading these discussions in your area are completely 100% focused on what comes next. So I kind of threw like 3 questions in there already, but what are the thoughts? I feel like whatever your section leaders are focusing on right now might, because they're completely focusing on it, might be the example for what Section 3 thinks of by the time we get to November 14th and have about 2 to 3 weeks to figure it out.
I think that right now we're probably at the end of, and this is from talking to athletic directors and superintendents, we're at the end of the, okay, we took a deep breath, we canceled everything, we kind of got through the storm of all the feedback that we were going to get from parents and community members and athletes. So I feel like they took that collective deep breath and said, okay, what's next? And what I'm hearing now from, again, ADs, superintendents, is they're focusing right now on getting back to school. A lot of our schools here had delayed some things and didn't physically go back until about the 21st, somewhere in there. So a lot of schools went virtual for a week or two. Some are still virtual. Some are going to stay virtual. But it's been interesting to talk to the coaches and everybody who are kind of in that beginning phase of getting back into the building. So I feel like we're going to have a week or two of that still, of like, hey, how is school going? How is my teaching going? How is it having kids with masks for 8 hours a day? So I feel like we have that hurdle. And then the next big hurdle, I think, is, Section 4 doesn't want to start games until January 4th. So now what I'm hearing from a lot of coaches is what's going to happen in November. And they're kind of taking it like a school-by-school basis on, should we start practicing in November and December? How early can we start practicing? I know that some of the basketball coaches have already said, I've been asking my school, like, how early I can get in the gym. Could I do individual workouts with players? When can I start meeting with them? And the message seems to be from the schools, keep holding off, we'll let you know. So again, we're still in that holding pattern that you and I have talked about dozens of times. So I feel like right now we're in that, let's get back to school, see how that goes. If everything's going well, then when we get into November and December, that's when schools are really starting to say, all right, how soon do we get the green light from our school, then the league, then the section on when we can start practicing? I think everybody's just trying to get ready as much as they can for that January 4th day where games can start down here. So that's the vibe I'm getting at the moment. It's strange because, again, it's what we've talked about dozens of times of hurry up and wait, so.
But at the same time, I'm guessing that you're mentioning that January 4th date because January 3rd was the latest that the fall season could have gone, but now,
right,
at least in Section 3, it's November 14th. The New York State High School Athletic Association has decided that the winter sports season officially begins on November 30th. But at the moment, the New York State Department of Health hasn't authorized high-risk sports to play. And obviously, we knew that football would have been allowed to practice. So practices within the school for high-risk sports are allowed. But what wound up happening is the state association decided to postpone all of the football high-risk related fall sports to fall 2 that they created. Still, football can practice, though. That's allowed, as long as it's within the social distancing guidelines, and it's open to the entire student body. Those are the state association rules. But we don't even know at the moment. I'm sure there's some uncertainty still, especially making it challenging to make these decisions when most of the winter sports are not even approved to happen yet. So trying to decide, are you going to play on January 4th when at the moment there's been no alternative guidance before December 31st, which we're still waiting for. And we don't know what happens on January 1st, whether it just automatically means you could start on January 1 or not.
Yeah, I think they're just hopeful down here. Like, again, they're going to meet in October and November to get together and kind of see if there is more guidance by then. I think that's their wishful thinking of, hey, hopefully we could hit the ground running in January and try to get a shortened season in. But I think for now, they're, again, trying to figure out what they could do, what would be allowed to be done in November and December. And will that come down to another decision by the section? Will it be a league thing? Will it be a school thing? So I think there's still a lot of kind of balls that everybody's juggling up in the air. That's kind of the vibe that's getting put out there by a lot of the athletic directors that I talked to. They're like, hey, November is going to be when we start figuring things out again. But right now, again, hurry up and wait for us down here at least.
Yeah, I imagine that in some ways it's frustrating, but again, when Section 4 did have its poll, it was 58 to 10 to 1 in
Right.
favor of postponing. So everyone was kind of on the same page as far as, you know, they had to move this, and this was kind of the situation that was, and none of this was chosen to deal with this, but specifically within the context of everything, the decision to postpone, it's not like unless those 10 schools are coming out with fire, or, like with fire and pitchforks, that no one's really upset that the sports haven't started like they have in Section 3. They voted for it to be postponed, where Section 3 majority voted to go ahead, and they are, given that schools have their own decision to not participate at this time. So I think what's interesting is when Old Forge was talking last night, one of the questions asked to Athletic Director Tanner Russell that I heard on the live stream at that board meeting was, if we even postponed interscholastic athletics to fall 2 in March 1st, who would they play? And he listed off all the schools that postponed and said, potentially those schools, I mean, if we wind up making a little league out of those schools, and we're allowed to have games for this postponed fall 2 season, and any schools that at the moment, there is the potential that if a school shuts down because of a COVID-19 related issue, which we're hoping does not happen, but if it does, it would depend on when in the season. There's been no official decision on how many games is, okay, you don't postpone, and how many games is you do, because the overwhelming idea is you can't just play fall 1 and then also play fall 2, just because there are other teams playing. You choose one, but it's going to be interesting to see when games start. I think right now the intramural practices that are happening is interesting, and that's been a huge step into getting back with wearing the masks and having practices and seeing that everything's gone well for a week so far. And then seeing what happens when games begin. The earliest games are beginning here. The earliest scheduled one is October 3rd. So it's a weekend, but I plan to be there at one or just move around to a few games. And it's interesting from a reporting standpoint how we're going to feel as it comes toward winter sports. I'd be curious to talk with you, because being inside, if one of the biggest issues we've heard discussed for so long now is playing against other school athletes, but especially being inside is the high risk sport, and how they don't want student athletes from different schools being inside playing in close proximity to each other. Do we as reporters go inside every single high school to cover games? And there's no option, they said, to play outside basketball, or someone asked outdoor volleyball. Can we do that instead of indoor volleyball for the schools that consider it a fall sport? And they're like, no. So definitely no outdoor basketball in the winter. That's for sure. Not here. Maybe in Florida, where it's warmer, some warmer climate. But it'll be interesting, I think, to see what happens when games start. Now, do you have any intention of covering some Section 3 and moving north? I know your coverage area for the radio station is not except for Cooperstown, is not there, whereas my television market is in Section 4 partially. But do you have any intention of just following that more yourself as a reporter for a radio station?
I would say no. The two schools that we tend to hit in Section 3 are Cooperstown. We cover them religiously. And then Sherburne-Earlville is right over the line up from Norwich. And they tend to play a lot of schools in our neck of the woods. They used to be in a league down here. They used to be in Section 4 a long time ago before they redrew the lines. And as you said, they're not doing anything this fall either, because I had originally hoped, like, hey, I could go up to Sherburne. We have a good relationship with them because a lot of our teams go there for their Christmas basketball tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. So no, at this point, I don't have a relationship with any of those schools that are still playing, besides when we see them at a state tournament or anything like that. I think I need to keep my focus on doing the best that I can down here for our Section 4 athletes. I think the podcast has been important to keep talking to athletes and coaches and grads and everything. I think the Pony League will be my main focus is, as long as that goes. And then I don't know, will I have to get creative eventually? Maybe. But
what do you mean? We've been creative this whole time.
Right.
Starting the podcast, starting the cross section, all these different storylines, I think have been very creative. But you're right. As our Section 4 expert, keep following those storylines there, because I made a post yesterday that, it's refreshing, like I said, to see the student athletes and hear from them in Section 3 practicing, but it's just as important to get in touch with the ones that are, what their experience is when they're not playing right now, and watching everyone else around them who maybe in other sections are, or in your case in other states, because you border Pennsylvania and
I did pull up the MAC press release here, the MidState Athletic Conference, because that's probably the biggest league that we cover geographically here at the station, that has Sydney and Unitego and Bainbridge Guilford and Afton and Harpersville and all those, Delhi, Walton, all those schools. And they said in their press release that they had voted on September 11th to postpone all scholastic athletics until January 4th. And a lot of the other leagues around here have kind of gone by that. So just going back to what I said before, they've put that on paper, but I'm hopeful that, as some ADs have kind of hinted, like, we'd like to maybe try to get something going in November if things are looking better. But so I just bring that up because I will have to be creative for a long time if I don't see anything down here until January 4th, if that even gets approved. So,
but of course, you'll still be following just like we have been doing before this week for me too, following the logistics, getting the different perspectives, seeing what decisions are made, checking in with everyone on how these decisions are made and what's the thought process. Because that is, like I said, a good portion of my focus is going to include now the games and the standings and, who's competing for the league title. Because that's what they said. They all want to compete for their league title. They could, Kate Ozog also had the good quote of saying, we can't win again, he said, because they don't no chance for the playoffs for 3 straight sectional titles. But he said, but we can still win. We can still win games. You can still try and be the best in your league or your new league, depending on which league you're in and how they've restructured. So, but my focus will also have to turn toward what's going on with intersports and all that, whereas you've got the time to really, although I'm sure you wish you had some games, I'm sure you'll be able to focus on those decisions, which is why, again, I think that you'll kind of be the crystal ball for how things play out maybe across the state as a case study. But it will be interesting also, I think, up here because now we're going to see what happens when fans gather. How well do people follow the rules? Which schools are allowing spectators, which aren't? It's 2 per participant. How do they count that? It's going to be very interesting to watch. And
I know down here, a lot of the administrators were like, we didn't want to take on the policing duties. We didn't want to be the bad cop at these games saying, you can come in, you can't. I think that was another big fear down here is, unless you just shut it off completely from fans, how do you police that? Whose responsibility is that? Can you put that on, a lot of teachers will volunteer or get paid a little extra to work at the game as a chaperone or something like that, and kind of keep an eye on the crowd and what's going on. Do you have to put that on those people? Like, that's a lot to ask of them. So, again, that'll be tough.
We saw the video of I believe it was Ohio State football fan who was escorted out, we can say, of the stadium because the fan didn't want to wear a mask, and so they determined that person was trespassing, and then it became a scene. So, I don't know if we're going to see that on the high school level, but you never know. This is a serious virus still, and they're trying to keep these rules in place for the safety of the other fans, for the safety of the coaches, and of course the safety of the participants. So we shall see. But it definitely is a good feeling to have that sense of normalcy that the students are saying for them practicing, and for me to get back to practices. Today will be 5 days in a row. I'm like, I'm just like, am I really outside? I'm getting up from my desk because there's something going on in the area. Whereas, I'm watching the New York Mets, our favorite baseball team, have to win out this next 3 days, 2 days, to have a shot at the more than half league postseason, which is, of course, they're in Buffalo and New York City. So these New York teams, closest teams to us right now.
Well, I'd be lying if I said if I didn't say I was jealous. So I hope you're enjoying the sunshine and getting a little bit of normal fall sports life out there. It's really cool.
I'll bring my phone and we'll zoom you in, and
there we go.
Bat you in, and I'll be like, look, you're here with me, because that's the new world, right? Here we are. We're in the same room right now. Of course, of course. Anyway, definitely keep me posted on that, because I'm sure I and everyone else are curious to hear what happens there, and I'll send you some scores and highlights.
Can't wait.